So, Robin Joseph, you are the director of Fox and the Whale, one of the animated short contenders for this year's Academy Awards, one of the shortlisted 10. Talk a little bit about where the idea for this movie came from.
The idea of the film for me came from wanting to do something about curiosity. A lot of my interest is in science and space exploration, that kind of that drive of like trying to look for something which is so on the fringes, but still pursuing. And I think that kind of became a big basis for the inception of the idea.
Mhm. So then, where did I guess, how did you arrive at the idea of a fox looking for a mythical whale?
The whale itself is sort of an abstraction. Um, with the fox specifically, there was something great in that contrast of something so small and fragile like a fox looking for something much bigger like a whale. So originally, when I did the first piece of concept art, I had the title "Fox and the Whale," and that title, like that play of the two characters, always appealed to me. And then the world itself was kind of inspired from a trip I took to the Pacific Coast here in Canada in Salt Spring Island in Victoria. So it was a combination of those things.
Now, you have worked on several high-profile animated movies, including things like Rio and Secret Life of Pets and Despicable Me. This is, according to the Internet Movie Database, your first credited directorial effort. So, how did working on those movies help prepare you to direct your own?
Well, on those films, I was doing either character design or visual development. So my into structuring the story is definitely from a visual angle. So with Fox and the Whale, my approach into it was through storyboarding, composition, environment, and color. Um, so that was my way of easing into the project, and definitely like working on other productions in the past. Kind of give me a familiarity with especially software. Um, so yeah.
You mentioned the visual aspect of it, and the movie is basically like a silent movie. I mean, I don't think there's any dialogue in it at all, so it is basically reliant on visual storytelling. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, like I wanted to. I mean, the tone of the film is very subtle, uh, and also from a design point of view, like I was trying to do characters which didn't rely too much on sort of facial expressions, or the performance is not really carried by dialogue. So part of it was the limitations I had in terms of budget, in terms of the time scale I was working with. Um, and the other, in terms of pantomime, you can kind of try and convey ideas which are sort of on the tip side of abstract, but also a little bit more sensitive. So yeah, that was kind of my take on it.
Can you talk a bit about the visual style of it, the style of animation that you used for the movie?
It's a hybrid. So the character animation is done in CG. It's done in a package called Maya, and everything else is 2D. So the backgrounds are done in Photoshop. The visual effects and compositing is done in After Effects. Everything kind of pretty much stayed in the Adobe ecosystem.
Mhm. Well, I mean, in terms of like color and shape and line and things like that, I mean, how did you arrive at that kind of visual approach for it?
So the idea was to keep the characters almost like a symbol, have like an absolute simplicity and distill it to its essence, and then set it against a backdrop which, if you look at it, like the paintings themselves are a little loose, but the lighting is very realistic. So my hope was, it would kind of ground everything. It would kind of give it a sense of believability. So yeah.
We know what a painstaking process animation is like. Can you talk a bit about, I guess, sort of the nuts and bolts of how long it took you and how much, work hours you had to put into just kind of simple things?
Yeah, I was working on it full time. It took 16 months in total, from starting boarding to finishing final sign. Um, and my partner Kim, she was working on the character animation part. She was on it part time. She still had a studio job, and she would work on it evenings and weekends.
Mhm. What was the most difficult sequence for you to animate?
Um, Actually, the hardest sequence technically wasn't really complex. There's a chunk in the film towards the end among the fox among whale bones, and for whatever reason, I mean, it's technically it's one of the simplest scenes, but in terms of production, that's the one that took the longest, and a lot of it had to do with just really observing whale bones up close, and there was sort of like a lucky uh, break where I was at a museum in Ottawa, and they had a full-on blue whale skeleton that was on display, and that kind of became the jumping off point where um, I used a lot of reference from that. Um,
Tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into animation. What was that journey like for you?
I'm originally from India. I moved to Canada in 2002, and that was to pursue studying animation here. And then I worked in the industry for a few years here in Toronto, and then I went freelance. So a lot of the journey for me was from a very, very small town in India where animation is sort of obscure. And then coming here and, working in an industry where you find a community around it, and there's a lot of support.
Mhm. When you got the news that you had been shortlisted for the Academy Award, what did that recognition mean for you?
I mean, you don't expect something like that. It's mostly a surprise. Um, it's really overwhelming, um, just to be in the company of some of the other films that are up there. Um, so yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, you have won a couple of film festival prizes for this movie already for Best Animated Short. I mean, what did that mean for you?
It's good to kind of put it out into the community and see how people respond to it. A lot of times with the production, you're kind of pigeonholed and have your blinders on, and you don't quite know what the response is going to be if people are actually going to commit to it, give it a chance. So things like festivals and awards, that's some sense of validation for it.
And what are you working on now?
So right now I'm researching a longer project. I'm writing and finding reference for it and sort of doing the build up towards that.
Well, Robin Joseph, thank you so much. Congratulations on the movie. Appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks so much, Zach.
You're welcome. Have a good one.